Hello again, and welcome to our video demonstration of how to kind of put it all together for this IPO process, this input processing and output section that we're working on. What I want to do in this example is do something similar to what your homework assignment would be. I want to make a time conversion. Essentially, what this program will do, it will allow the user to enter in a specific number of seconds, and it'll likely be a very large number, something like 17,321 seconds. And what I'd like it to do is break it down into how many hours, minutes, and seconds that is equivalent to. Um, that's the logic we want to kind of work with. We should know also that there are, for this conversion, 3,600 seconds in an hour. And obviously, there are 60 seconds in a minute. As long as we have those two pieces of information, we should be okay to make this work for ourselves. So, in terms of the logic and how I might set it up, um, I'm going to go with something like this. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my start, and I'll fill out my stop as well. And then in between, we're going to begin our declaration process. So we are going to declare our variables so that we know what we're working with. Okay. Here, obviously, I'm going to be bringing in a certain number of starting seconds. This is going to be an integer value. So say integer, and I'll call it starting seconds. And I am going to capitalize that throughout my process because I'd like that to also be considered a constant. Okay. You could also write the word constant here if you wish, but just capitalizing it is really enough for me. Okay. Integer starting seconds, simply because I know I'm not going to change that value as I go through it. I will come up with new variables to kind of deal with what I need to deal with. All right, so now as I go through this process, when I look at declarations, I always look for input. That's going to be the variables I'll be typing into the console. I'm going to grab those and put them into memory, so that's an easy one to grab. I also always look at the output. What am I displaying to the screen? That's going to be information I'm going to have to calculate and then shoot out to the user. So I'm going to need to calculate the number of hours, minutes, and seconds that are remaining in this problem. So I am going to create another integer for the hours. I'm going to create an integer for the sec or minutes. And I'm going to create an integer for the seconds. Okay. Now, if I didn't say it before, I'm also using Notepad++ as my text editor of choice here for my pseudocode. Again, you can use any editor you wish, Atom or just any built-in text platform into any IDE that you have, things of that nature. I would not suggest Microsoft Word or Google Docs for these. It just comes with too many bells and whistles that are necessary for this. Things like grammatical error fixing and spell checking and things like that. Just find a nice plain text editor to do your work. Now, with that being said, I would invite you to kind of pause the video here and see what you can come up with in terms of actually solving this problem. What's going to be input, what's going to be processed, what's going to be output to the screen, and we'll follow that process. So as soon as you've got that done, come back and see if you did something similar to what I did. At this point, you're probably back with me. So I'm going to go through the process. We're going to go through our input process first and foremost. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to display to the screen a string that says enter a number of starting seconds. And we'll have them input that. Okay. Then I'm going to get into my processing section. This is where I will do all of my math, all of the work that I need to do. So I always like to break it up in this manner. So first thing I'm going to do is my largest denomination of time is going to be hours. So I'm going to calculate that first. Now to figure out how many hours there are in the seconds that I have, essentially what I'm going to do is divide. Okay. So let's do this. Let's set our hours equal to starting seconds divided by 3,600. I know there's going to be 3,600 seconds in an hour. So if I take that 3,600 and portionalize my starting seconds into those chunks, I'll find out how many hours there are. Okay, so that's relatively simple. Um, Next, I want to figure out minutes essentially, but I want to make sure I don't find minutes from starting seconds because a lot of those starting seconds are bulked into the hours. So I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to find out how many seconds are left. Set seconds equal to starting seconds mod 3600. Okay. And again, if you don't like the mod keyword here, you can always use a percent sign. It means essentially the same exact thing. This number here is going to give me how many seconds are left over. Okay, so whatever hours, groups of hours, seconds were taken out for the groups of hours, I am now left over with a certain number of seconds that I can use to calculate the minutes with. So I'm going to say set minutes equal to seconds this time divided by 60 because there are 60 seconds in a minute. And I'm going to do essentially the same thing that I did before. I'm going to set my seconds equal to what was left in that seconds variable mod 60. And that'll tell me the leftovers. So at this point in time, I have the number of hours, I have the number of minutes, and I have the number of seconds that are all left over from my calculation. So this should provide me with an accurate result in the amount of time that's left over or calculated from the input of starting seconds. So let's get into our output section of this. Here I'm going to display, again, I'm going to display my starting seconds one more time just to kind of echo my input. So let's do this. We'll display, we'll say something like starting seconds was, and then we'll put in a comma, starting seconds, right? That'll allow me to show two pieces of information at once. We'll do this again. We'll display, okay? Let's get this typed right. And then we'll say it turns into something like hours, and I'll say colon hours, and we will display minutes, seconds. That should be a fairly straightforward program. So again, just to recap what we have here, I'm using a plain text editor to write my pseudocode. I find that to be the easiest place to do it. I'll save this and upload it wherever it needs to be uploaded. But either way, I've got my declarations. These are where all my variables are going to be. I've got a constant integer for the starting seconds. That way I know once it's input, it's never going to change. Okay. I might use it in math, but I'm never going to see it on the left side of an equal sign. That's important. I've got a certain number of hours, minutes, and seconds that I'm going to calculate. I input the number of starting seconds. I calculate hours by dividing the starting seconds by 3600. I calculate how many seconds are left after I've dealt with the hours by modding the 3600 by or the starting seconds by 3600. This is the remainder operation. It tells me what's left over. The minutes is equal to seconds divided by 60 because I decrease the number of seconds from the starting seconds, but it tells me how many is left over from the hours, so I can calculate minutes from that. And then I calculate how many seconds are left from the whole process. So this is just one approach. There are other approaches you could take with a bunch of multiplication and subtraction, but the modulus operator is your friend here. It takes care of all of that for you, so you don't need to do much. When the problem extrapolates and maybe gets larger, when you turn it into days and weeks and years and things like that. So that way your formulas don't have to get much larger. All in all, should be pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, let me know and I'd be happy to answer. But in the next video, what I'm going to do is move on to how to create the flowchart for this particular process.